Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us again for another podcast. I am Jackie Hale, and I'm joined by Donna Pettry-Smith and Shane Darnell, and we are here to talk about an overview of the PAST Act and UPHA's recent involvement with the trip to Washington. So, Donna, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Tell us a little bit about the PAST Act, a little history of that, and how it relates to the 2016 amendment to the Horse Protection Act.
Well, the PAST Act is technically the Prevent All Soaring Tactics Act, and it's a bill to amend the Horse Protection Act and establish a new system for inspecting horses for soaring. It revises penalties for violations, and it modifies enforcement procedures. The PAST Act specifically, though, names the three breeds that have a history of soaring, which would be the Tennessee walking horse, racking horse, and the spotted saddle horse. The PAST Act was created because certain lawmakers felt that the Horse Protection Act that was enacted in 1970 had not ended the practice of soaring like it was intended to do. So the relationship between the PAST Act and the USDA's 2016 proposed changes to the Horse Protection Act is when the PAST Act was introduced in 2015, it died in committee, and it prompted the USDA to propose added rules to the Horse Protection Act regulations to fulfill the intent of the PAST Act. So essentially, they were just going to take a different path to the same destination. The main issue that the UPHA and a lot of other breeds had was the introduction of the language related breeds that was added to also naming the three breeds with the history of soaring. And groups like the UPHA felt that that was not the congressional intent.
The UPHA task force that is working on the PAST Act, how did that group come about being formed?
Well, that was initially made up of a group of individuals that we all traveled to Maryland. Some of us had plans to do it together, and some of us just went on our own, and we all ended up in Maryland in September of 2016 to testify at the USDA offices during the comment period. And after that, the group was housed under UPHA because it was like an umbrella for all of the trotting breeds. So we felt that the UPHA was probably the best organization to represent the task force or to form the task force under, because it represented multiple breeds, multiple trotting breeds, and there was, power in numbers. Some of the things also, once the UPHA task force was formed, the first thing we sort of had to decide upon was what was going to be our language request of the USDA. What would make us happy if they would change about the regulation to get us to support it. So we did have a break with the USES because we had different schools of thought as far as proposed language. USEF proposed language that exempted any competitions licensed or endorsed by the USES from the HPA regulations. The UPHA task force, the issue with this language was that the expense of having a USEF licensed horse show is unrealistic for a lot of people at the grassroots level, just because of the added expense of hiring experienced show secretaries and stewards and USEF licensed judges. So we felt that those groups would be left in the wind. So the UPHA proposed language that requested return to specifically having the 3 breeds with a history of soaring only named in the regulation as it was in the PAST Act. So we basically wanted that, and that would strike the term related breed from the regulation. At the end of the day, the USDA ultimately used the language recommended by the UPHA.
So Donna, it's Shane. Just for clarification, what USCF wanted was that on all of these shows that were non-USCF rated, what they recommended was that the USDA inspectors came into those shows and inspected all of those horses for soaring, even though they didn't have a history of it.
Well, I think I can't speak exactly to the intent of what USCF wanted, but on its face, as also USCF is a regulatory body. It's the national governing body of equestrian sport, and so I think their language dealt mostly with what they can control. So what they can control would be their horse shows and their competitions. So I think it was easiest for them to request that only their horse shows would be exempt from the regulations. So yes, that would mean, and this is why the UPHA, had a different school of thought, was that, okay, if only USCF licensed or endorsed competitions are exempt from the Horse Protection Act regulations, that is going to leave any unlicensed competition to, have inspectors come. Even if it's a saddlebred show or a Morgan horse show, and these breeds have no history of soaring. So that was a problem for us because, like I stated, the expense of having a USCF-rated show, it's just not possible for a lot of our smaller grassroots level horse shows.
Donna, thinking back to that time in 2016, one of the most disappointing things to me personally was that, as far as I know, no one warned us. Not USCF, not American Horse Council, not anyone that one would think was looking out for us or had our best interest at heart. And the first I heard about it personally was following the first public comment hearing, which was held in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, when some friends who were in attendance called me and said, this could affect American saddlebreds too because of the wording of this rule using this language, related breeds and horses that moved in an exaggerated manner. So it was really Louisville before we got our heads together and figured out what this process was and how we needed to move forward. So we mobilized quickly and got the group that went to Maryland and made an impression on USDA, and then really mobilized the troops and got people to file their comments, so much so that we made enough of an impression on USDA that they thought, well, we need to extend this comment period for another, whatever it was, 30 or 60 days, which bought us enough time for Trump to get elected and subsequently put a freeze on all new regulations. And had that election not gone the way it did, and had he not enacted that freeze, things could be very different today. So I just want to say thank you to UPHA for continuing the education process that we started back in 2016, learning how to take care of ourselves in the legislative and policy-making arenas. And I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about your trip to Washington, your work with the lobbyist Frankie Troll, and where this goes from here.
Okay, stemming from exactly what you just talked about, how we were so far behind and not prepared the last time around when this came through, we were guided through this period in 2016, very luckily, by Frankie Troll, who's a UPHA member and who had saddlebreds in the past. And Frankie is a lobbyist in Washington, or was a lobbyist in Washington, D.C. She was the founder and president of Policy Directions, Inc., which was a Washington, D.C.-based government relations firm. And she also was the president of the National Association for Biomedical Research. So Frankie was well-versed in, dealing with these sorts of issues and how we needed to navigate the process, because a lot of us, this was new to all of us. And she was instrumental in, helping us form a strategic plan to attack these proposed changes to the Horse Protection Act in 2016. I will say once everything had settled down and was resolved, Frankie gave us some action items to implement being more prepared, like we talked about. And one of them was to get an economic impact study done. And luckily, the American Horse Council in 2017 was doing a new economic impact study. So UPHA became a large sponsor of it, and we got a breakout for the UPHA breeds, which was excellent. And it ended up, I believe, the annual economic impact of the UPHA breeds, which would be saddlebreds, Morgans, Arabians, Friesians, Hackneys, Roadsters, Dutch harness horses. There's about 9 or 10 breeds in there that ended up, the economic impact annually is $3.8 billion, which is huge. And we needed documentation of that to take with us to Washington. So we did. And another thing that Frankie wanted us to, an action item, was she wanted us to go to Washington with her and kind of learn how to advocate for the UPHA breeds. So that's how this trip came about. And many people know that in January of this year, the PAST Act was reintroduced into Congress. So we thought that this would be an appropriate time for us to go and, lobby for ourselves, advocate for the breeds. So what we did, it was Jennifer Dixon and Tammy Knatzer, myself, and we met Frankie in Washington, D.C., and we spent a whole day on the Hill, May 1st we did this, visiting different congressional offices. And Frankie had set everything up. So the focus was on the main sponsors of the PAST Act. So we went to the offices of Ted Yoho, who's always been a big supporter of the PAST Act, and Kurt Schrader, along with Senator Mark Warner. And we also visited the office of prominent members of the House Committee on Energy and Commerce, and that is where the bill was referred on January 22nd. So those two Congress people were Brett Guthrie and Jan Zukowski. And Jan is also the chair of the Subcommittee of Consumer Protection and Commerce, and that is where the bill was referred by the Committee on Energy and Commerce on January 31st. So Frankie was showing us how the process goes, and that's why we were following, the stakeholders sort of in the PAST Act. And when we went, we took a copy of the economic impact study with the UPHA breakout for the breeds, and then we also had a flash drive with a video, which was an introduction to the UPHA breed, or breeds of the UPHA, I should say. Because, we talk to people that they are not familiar with, all of our breeds or show horses in general. So the focus of the video was that our horses trot in competitions, and we put an emphasis on correctness of gait. And we explained to the people we talked to that the judging in our horse shows weighs very heavily on soundness of the horse and that there's absolutely no incentive for all of our breeds to soar our horses. And I think that after watching the short video, the people we spoke to totally understood what we were talking about, which was fantastic. And in talking to a lot of these people, it sounds like the PAST Act is going to pass the House, but it probably will not pass the Senate. So we also, in anticipation of that, we visited the office of Colin Peterson, who is the chair of the House Agriculture Committee, just in case, this kind of follows the same path it did in 2016, and the USDA maybe takes this again and tries to push this through, as a regulation.
So what was the message that you were trying to spread when you were there?
The message was basically that the UPHA breeds are not opposed to the PAST Act as long as it specifically names the 3 breeds with a history of soaring. And then, again, we were trying to carry through the message that the reason why we don't want the quote-unquote related breeds encompassed in, this regulation is because we do not soar our horses. There's no incentive for us to soar our horses, and so it is not necessary to include us with these other breeds that do have a history of soaring.
It's actually counterproductive. The test for soundness that veterinarians use is the trot, and you cannot trot and not be sound. So the legislators that literally don't know which end bites and which end kicks, they're not horse people. They don't understand this. We found that same thing back in 2016 when you showed them a video or you explained the movement of the horse and how it, soaring a horse for some breeds may accentuate their gait. It is not going to accentuate the gait of horses who trot. And even though some American saddlebreds can rack, they all trot. So thank you for thank you for explaining that to them ahead of time before it's an emergency.
Well, and on the video that we took, it showed all pictures of trotting. We focused on the trot because we felt we didn't have enough time to really go into the difference between, say, a running walk and a rack because, you only have a short amount of time. I think that if these congressmen and their staffers understand that these horses trot and the horses that trot cannot trot properly if they're soared, that is a basic message that they can, get, which is,
keep it simple.
We try to keep it very simple. Yes.
What are next steps for you guys? What do you need? How can we help? How can the viewers help?
Well, I think the next steps that we're going to take are, first of all, we're going to keep monitoring the situation so that we never get in a position that we were in 2016, because that was not a good feeling for any of us that were involved, that we were that far behind and we had that much to learn. We scrambled for a couple of months. And like Jackie stated, we had some lucky breaks, I would say, that things ended up going the way they did. What we're going to do is we're going to get the economic impact study out so that people can share it. So we're going to be posting that on the UPHA website and any other places where people can get their hands on it because it's a very useful tool. We're also going to make the short video available for people. We just have to do some editing on it still to get it to where it can be what we want it to be shared by everyone. But it should be an excellent tool to give to, you know, congressmen or anyone really that, you know, you want to explain, you know, the breeds of the UPHA to. Thirdly, if people want to get involved and make a donation, you know, people can make a donation to the UPHA legal fund. That was set up in 2016, and we used some of that money to, I believe we used some of that money to help sponsor the economic impact study so that we could have it moving forward to protect ourselves. But that's a good, you know, use of people's funding, and also to pay, you know, for a lobbyist for, you know, the UPHA breeds.
Okay.
Well, we'd love to share that economic impact study and the video when it's available, and the link to the legal fund via Horse Show Wire, so that people know how they can help. Because at this stage, that's what you need, is people to spread the word and to, you know, help you with funding so you can continue to stay on top of this.
Right, and you know, we're fortunate right now that the version of the PAST Act that's going through Congress does specifically name the 3 breeds. So right now we're just being proactive, which is a good place to be. It, you know, feels a lot better to be proactive than scrambling. So currently it's not, you know, we're not scrambling. So that's a good thing. So everybody can feel good about that. But, you know, that doesn't mean that we can just, you know, just ignore.
Let our guard down and relax. Right, yeah. Right. We got to stay on top of it.
Yep.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Donna, and to UPHA for staying on top of it, protecting us, advocating for us, and making that trip to Washington to try to educate the people that need to know the difference.
Well, thank you so much for having me today to talk about it. I just want to encourage people to, you know, keep being involved in these sorts of things, because it's so important for the horse industry, you know, that we're vigilant and we keep an eye on any kind of legislation or anything that would come forward that could be a detriment to us.
Well, nice work, Donna. We really appreciate it, everything you do.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. You guys do a ton, too. Thank you for everything you guys do.